I'm joined now by Vincent Haskins. Hello, Vince. This was a really awkward handshake immediately because I didn't know we were doing a handshake.
I thought he was. Anyway,
I was like, "It's Vince," and then he was like, "Hi."
So saw some wood.
Vince is here. It's gonna be that we'll just we'll just do that scene in Star Trek Generations where Kirk is just chopping wood, and then I walk up and I'm like, "Oh, I found Vince in the Nexus."
Oh, my knee.
Anyway, Vince is here to help me talk about The Punisher, our long-awaited Netflix Punisher review. Yeah. We've waited so long, we had to hurry up and get this out before Jessica Jones drops.
I saw a couple of the episodes. I figured it was good enough.
Yeah, so he can give us he can give us like a little bit of a sense of what maybe he would think of the show if he watched the thing. No, Vince watched all of this, and but it's been a little while for you.
It's been yeah.
I finally just finished it today. I had watched all the way up through episode 11. And that was weeks ago, and then I was waiting for you to finish, and I was waiting for Eric to finish, and then you finished, and then Eric didn't manage to get it finished, and then life got away from us, and then I went, it's been long enough now, I better start back from scratch. So I've seen the show twice, but the last 2 episodes just once.
That's cute.
So, Vince, we haven't had you on to talk about this version of The Punisher really at all. Back when you were still regularly doing videos with us, we were talking a lot about what we thought he might be like in Daredevil. So we had a lot of ideas about him, but we have never actually talked about the actual performance and the actual product. So, what overall, before we even get into the show, do you think about what John Bernthal, is that his name?
You know, I think it's Barenthal.
Barenthal playing the Punisher. Is he? How close is he to what is in your head the definitive Punisher? What is he doing that you want from the Punisher, and what do you wish he was doing that's not there?
He brings an intensity that I like a lot. So, and I like this like lack of eye contact thing that he does with folks.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Where he gets in Microchip's face, and he's like, "Here's Microchip," and he's standing right here, and he keeps going over him, and I'm going, what? Like, what is it? Is there, like, you don't give eye contact because you don't want to make eye contact with the person you're about to brutalize, or you don't want to sympathize with them, or you don't want the person to see what's behind your eyes, or what? But I like that a lot.
I think all of that is in there. Yeah, and you notice that he has a tendency to try to at least look like he's not taking people seriously, because this character is all about not trusting people.
However, you look at, and I think this all kind of just is encapsulated in the moments that he has with Karen Page.
Of course.
And he goes up there and he'll look her in the eyes and he'll talk to her and he'll let himself look a little weak. But at the end of the day, he has his distinct set, I'm going to do this regardless because this is what my moral code says I'm supposed to do.
Well, and am I right that once he and David are definitively, like, really actually friends and he trusts him, like, right at the end in that truck, I'm pretty sure he actually makes eye contact with him.
You know, I think you're right. And I think he does periodically through it because he'll make eye contact with social worker guy, whose name I forget. One-legged dude.
Yeah. And also with his wife, probably. With David's wife.
And yeah, so
that whole relationship's really interesting.
There are people with whom he is hiding.
Curtis.
Yeah,
that's his name.
There are people who he's hiding his real self from, but then he will be more honest with them about how he is at the particular moment. So
yeah.
he wants this relationship back with his wife, and he gets a little bit of that with Chip's wife, but. Or excuse me, nobody calls him Chip. What am I talking about?
Nobody even calls him Microchip. Yeah,
that's true.
We'll just call him David.
We'll call him Jimmy. So Jimmy's wife.
No, he has a name.
That's right, Stephen. But so he gets a little bit of this back, but I like that he's just so like he doesn't want to cross a line between husband and wife because it was so important to him.
Yeah,
and that. His moral code, I think, is complicated and interesting.
Yeah, and
he judges himself for it.
Well, and some of it is moral code. Now we're just getting into the meat of it. It's funny. This is not how this usually goes. Usually we're talking about everything around a thing for like 15 minutes, then we finally get into the meat of it. Okay. I ask you a general question, and we're right in the meat of it already. It's great.
I brought my
I think some of it is moral code, and some of it is a guy that actually doesn't want things regular people want because he doesn't see himself as still alive.
Yeah.
I think it's important to note that part of the reason that he's not going to go after David's wife is because he doesn't think of himself as... he doesn't want a life anymore.
Yeah. He's no longer a person. Which, that's a thing that I talked about the Punisher. I talked with the Punisher about it. He and I are friends.
Did you go get breakfast?
We did.
He eats a lot of breakfast, this guy.
It's the most important meal of the day. which Cap...
In fact, we just had breakfast.
That's right.
Just before this.
Back when Cap watched the first few episodes, he texted me and said, "Boy, the Punisher likes breakfast." And I said, "Most important meal of the day." So Cap texts me this evening and says, "Do you want to go get dinner before we do the Punisher vid?" And I said, "Yeah, let's go get breakfast." So we went. We got
that's what we did. I don't know.
Omelets. I had sausage and eggs.
it was delightful.
And then baklava. I don't know why. It's a pie place. Had to get baklava.
And then we found out that someone was trying to murder us, and we had to run off real fast. we paid for our dinner real fast, and we ran off. And we said, what is it? What is it? He says when he's in that diner and he's got to run off real fast. He just goes delicious, and then he runs off.
I like how blunt and to the point. You know what? Another thing that I like about him a lot is he's not just punishing other people; he's punishing himself.
Yeah,
and because
he's a walking contradiction.
Yeah, that beginning scene where he's basically where he basically punishes himself with work, and he's doing free labor. He's essentially just trying to ruin his body.
That's a great point.
And you look at these guys who don't want him to do that, and sure, he kind of comes back to the world where he's punishing other people. But that stuff is all super fascinating to me. I don't know where I'm going with it.
I guess he's actually Kirk in the Nexus if he hated himself. But like I said, I want you to talk a little bit about this Punisher versus comic Punisher and what in your head is definitive Punisher, because way back in the day when we were podcasting, before we even had much of an MCU, we were or just as that was starting. When Punisher Warzone was about to come out, you were hoping against hope that we would have a finally great, comic Punisher movie, and then we got Warzone, which is fun, but not exactly what you want.
It's so terribly good.
Yeah,
it's really terrible.
We've reviewed it, but then finally we get something I don't think you ever could have expected, which is a 13-episode character study about this character. How well do you think this show nails the spirit, the essence of the Punisher?
With this show, I think there's one thing that they missed. I mean, I suppose you get it with Daredevil season 2.
Yeah,
but because it is in some ways about Punisher versus the mob, or Punisher versus crime. But in the Punisher series, it's almost like somebody's been reading my Facebook and decided to make a Punisher show about the things that I care about at this particular moment.
As far as the things going on in the world and politics.
Yeah, all of that. And then, they took a real-world event and then they kind of adapted it to their show. I mean, it's not exactly the same thing. But the CIA running drugs to fund operations.
Yeah.
Which is real. You can get that in declassified documents. And I look at this stuff and I go, oh my God, somebody's been reading my Facebook.
But it makes a lot of sense to explore that with the Punisher because, a lot of the time we use... correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't read as much Punisher as you have, obviously. Neither has anybody in the world, probably.
I have read it all.
But he's read it all. But with... Do you still buy every Punisher thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Punisher Platoon right now is very good, but Garth Ennis hasn't made a bad Punisher thing.
Much of the time, his military background is simply that, it's background.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate that this is about his relationship with that, with that part of his life, right? And that part of the reason he's as much of a contradiction as he is because he hates himself for the person that he murders on orders from the government, but how different is he from all the people that he ends up having to gun down who are just being told to do something from somebody else at the top? And I really like that we're exploring that with this, but I was also wondering if that was if you actually liked that or had an issue with it, because that's new for the Punisher, right? The idea that he actually is the same kind of bad as the people that he guns down. I don't think we've had that before, have we?
Well, I like what they're doing with it in this show. We have had things in the past where he judges himself. And but
have we ever had that where he starts from murdering an innocent? That's where he starts.
Right. No, we've not had that.
Before his family is murdered. I mean, like he's judged during execution, or he's going to murder everyone who is taking out just innocent people. But he started from that place.
And I like the idea that he was just following orders when he did it, but subsequently he's come to grips with the fact that he was wrong and that his superiors are wrong, and he had to figure out that the people he was following are also corrupt in some way. And
I mean, Malbolgia could have picked him up for a hellspawn.
Yeah,
pretty easily.
Which I find that stuff. That stuff was what made this show, I think, particularly interesting. Was that he was in some way guilty and completely admitted it, and in some ways that might have been what really sent him down the rabbit hole. Now,
yeah,
there's a big moment, and I feel like part of this, my only real issue with this show is that everything surrounding him and his wife was extremely melodramatic. And
see, I had that issue with it until it unfolded more, and I think I've come around on it. But go ahead.
I came around on it because of where it went. And what's interesting is that a lot of it's in his head. So this stuff, or all of it's in his head.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not melodramatic. It's generic, and ultimately, I don't have a problem with that because of the reason he explains that he always remembers it that way.
And when he really comes down to it, is this a spoiler one? Am I?
Oh yes, of course. Good. Yeah.
So when it really comes down to it,
spoil this every way from Sunday.
He.
Billy Rousseau is Jigsaw.
So my wife and I were watching this together, well, off and on. I would watch it. She'd come in and out, and I'd fill her in on stuff because some shows that are super tense, like Punisher, she just can't handle,
and real gruesome.
Which is interesting because the Punisher was her favorite of the group. She thought Daredevil was boring.
That's interesting.
And so we had some friends. I kid you not. I'm going to get sidetracked for this.
Sure.
I hope he watches this video so that I can make fun of him. He, one of my wife's friends, they were all talking about. Excuse me, my wife, her friend's husband. We're all talking about the Netflix series, and Elena, my wife, says, "The Punisher was my favorite one to watch with Vince." And they said, "Really? We figured you liked Jessica Jones. Why? I don't know. Maybe she's a chick. Jessica
just because
Jones
she's a woman, yeah.
So maybe that's what they thought, girl power. But she's also, my wife likes things about people who are good at what they do and do it well.
Yeah.
And Jessica Jones is a show about a person who is not necessarily good at what she does and hates living. So I'm like, that doesn't really scream.
But I like sarcasm.
So the husband said, or the best one, Iron Fist. And my wife went, really? And he said, yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to make fun of this guy. We're going to duke it out. It's going to be lots of fun. So that's a thing that happened. But
he would not have liked my spoiler cast.
Which I even put a few things on Facebook about.
I saw that,
was like,
yeah.
Like this is a genuinely terrible show that's directionless.
I'm sorry, it is.
Like, this should have been a 3-episode. I guess that's a different podcast.
Yeah.
So.
And I want to talk about pacing with this because that's a thing. But anyway, what were you talking about?
I don't recall. Oh, although I think pacing could tie into it. You asked about Punisher punishing himself over his starting from the murder of an innocent. No, we've not seen that.
I actually kind of thought, or wasn't sure that you would go for that.
There's a little bit of me that has always questioned it. I've always just kind of accepted it because, Marvel's a supernatural universe. You can have a supernatural character who's just good at not killing innocent people. So there's always been a little bit of me that kind of resists that idea. They go, well, what if the Punisher killed an innocent? Well, he doesn't. So I'm like, I get it. I mean, part of the reason why the Punisher is so good is because of his recon.
This is kind of more realistic,
yeah,
is what you're saying.
I like what's going on in this a little bit more than what I've seen in the past, because sometimes it's just, here's the Punisher who's trying to destroy a building, and he's not going to kill everybody inside that building. Everybody inside that building is completely 100% guilty, and you know for sure. So, and then they never go back to question the morality of the subject.
It's more believable that he's as extreme as he is, in that because he already has that in his background, and it's tearing him up inside, and then his family is murdered, and then he finds out that it was by the same people that turned him into that. I mean, a lot of the show is about the military just using people as pawns and turning them into something less than human, but and changing their identity to the point where the PTSD thing to where they don't know who they are without war.
Yep. Which,
and that I thought that was really that was a really insightful criticism of that, because we play the PTSD thing all the time, and with the military. I mean, there's a lot in the show that we've seen before, certainly, and I have to be honest with you, it took me about half the series to really get engaged, because it was really well written and really well handled, and wonderful performances, but I kind of felt like I'd seen all of this before. And that starts to kind of change as it moves forward. I mean, I just appreciate the fact that it's as thoughtful as it is about the and again, you're kind of critical of a government that turns people into that without their feeling like they have any reason for doing what they're doing, where they're not really on the side of anything. It's just, but I mean, I think that line early on, like in the flashback, I point and you shoot. I think that's really important.
Oh yeah, and what I find interesting about that is that guy, I believe at the time he was a member of the CIA, and he became a higher ranking member of the CIA.
That's right.
And yeah, I mean, it had to be that way, because the entire operation was about running drugs, and then they tried to kill off everybody in the platoon except for the guy who was in on it,
Colonel Glasseye,
and the other dude, Billy Russo.
Russo, yeah.
So I find that stuff really interesting, because at this point in our culture, or not culture, excuse me,
Rollins, that's that guy.
At this point in our reality, we have moved past separation of CIA effort and military effort. It is not about protection of the world anymore, it's about manipulation of the world. And so here comes the Punisher, who becomes a pawn of the situation, and was just obeying orders because he thought that that's what he needed to do. And now he realizes that it's not the case. So when
I buy that he does that, because he says before that, or he says earlier, but not in a flashback in present day, that that in the moment you can't question morality or your orders or anything.
Mm-hmm. But that's the thing, is that's why he's in his own personal hell, because he put himself there without questioning any of this stuff. But if you did, then you might not get a mission accomplished, or you're putting yourself at risk. And if you don't accomplish a mission, you know what, maybe there's a greater good, and then you look beyond the evils that you commit to achieve the greater good, and realize that the greater good was not done for the greater good, but rather for gaining some kind of leverage within a situation, whether it's political or military or whatever.
Yeah. It's just about the U.S.'s interests as opposed to doing the right thing for anyone.
Which you can get into actual politics at this point.
Yeah.
We shan't.
No, we won't. Yeah.
Because you look at some of this stuff, and
but this is about real world politics, so we have to talk about that just within the context of the show we're talking about.
And you look at, and I think a lot of this stuff becomes echoed in. So you get kind of the extreme situation with the Punisher, but then you see people like Blonde Kid, whose name is, I believe,
Wilson. Is that guy, or is that?
That might be right. Heck, I don't know.
I'm thinking of somebody else.
Blonde Kid, and then you hear all these talking points from people in this show who are kind of representative of right wing, left wing. You hear these talking points, these kind of archetypal characters who are suffering from X disease, like particularly the thing that the show's actually about is PTSD.
Lewis Wilson is that? Yes, we're talking about the Bomber Kid.
Yeah. So you look at this guy who. He tries to start off reasonable, but he's already damaged by war, which then you look at a government that actively works against any kind of veteran support. They don't want to do that. I mean, you go to the VA, not kidding, you go to the VA, and they will hire people who have had their license revoked at some point. So, and depending, like they found that this was the big legal battle, blah, blah, blah. So this type of thing happens in reality. So veterans actually are not taken care of by the government. So you have two major senators, Bernie Sanders and John McCain, who jointly develop a bill to take care of veterans. And then the majority, so that it doesn't actually get passed, the majority of the government vote, or the majority of the senators voted down. Why? Because nobody actually cares about these people. So you can see how somebody who has been trained to kill becomes radicalized when someone tells them that your mental health, your health care, and your future well-being is unimportant.
Yeah, one of the things I really appreciated about the show is that everybody is sympathetic and that you understand how they got to where they got. You understand how they got there. And even if you can't condone their actions or you don't agree with them, everybody has some kind of a point, except for maybe Rollins, who is kind of just evil mustache-twirling guy. I mean, like, it probably makes sense how he got where he got, but you never see him in a reasonable period of his time, of his life. Actually, you know what? No, that's not fair. They make him sympathetic to this point. They say that he's born in the lap of luxury and he's never wanted for nothing, and he doesn't know what it's like to not have everything he wants at his beck and call, and he's corrupted by that because it's all about old money, and his whole family has been that way. Yeah. And so he's not sympathetic in the sense that you don't see him become that way. He was just born into it, and so he's always been that way. So he's supposed to represent the society that creates that. Mm-hmm. And so in order to be as completely malicious and evil as he has, he can't be a human through much of his life at all. Like, the last time that guy was a human being was probably like 8 years old.
It's when somebody took his rosebud away from him.
But the Wilson kid, like, I really feel for that guy.
Yeah. And I found the stuff where he dug out his own foxhole. Like, this stuff is really fascinating. I apologize for getting on the senator thing, but
that's all right. That's all right.
Kind of illustrates my point. How people feel.
I just think it's funny that you were like, we're not going to go there, and then you totally went there.
I'm like, hang on, let me kick this door open. So I said I wasn't going to open it.
No, I totally understand. Yeah.
But so I find this stuff to be.
But you're just stating facts. That's things that are going on. Yeah.
Things that have. Now I'm being a little general because I didn't want to have to get into exact specifics. So you're going to get some comments. That's not what happened. Whatever. I don't care.
Sure.
But so and something that's interesting between Rollins.
Thanks for coming back. This is the last time. You'll never be back on the channel again.
Welcome back. Here's the boot.
I'm kidding.
But I know. So what's interesting about Rollins is the relationship between him and the CIA director, and she, I think, is a perfect example of how corruption compromises morals.
Yeah.
Even for people like, look, we can't let the CIA get taken under. The CIA does a bunch of good work.
She's actually a principled person, but she's put between a massive rock and a hard place.
Yeah, and so the hard part becomes you have to look at your own reality and say, so a politician or a military official of some kind, they have to compromise what they want to do in order to, or they have to compromise their own morals in order to achieve the goals that are laid before them. And then at some point you have to say, how much is enough? When you have compromised yourself,
if you have any chance at real change, you might be the person that has to take a fall. I mean, you get stuck in the place of, I can either be a martyr or just allow the system to keep working the way it does in order to not only save my own skin but possibly save a whole lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. But that's the hard part is how do you decide when that time is? Because once you have gotten so good at saving your own skin, you're going to continue to save your own skin.
Sure.
So they even had a senator, a left-wing senator, who
that's all wrapped up in the stuff that starts to like chip away at our humanity. So like you said, once you start saving your own skin, you're going to save your own skin in exactly the same way as once you start killing people to solve your problems, it's hard to not continue to do that too.
That is a terrific point. Which I think with the Punisher, there is this complex and broken moral code, really broken within this show. But then you also have what's his face, Rollins, who Rollins, what's his face? It's a terrific name. Where Rollins makes the same decision, but makes it without guilt.
Yeah.
He does so not because of a moral code, but because he sees a personal gain or he sees a political gain to be made from it.
Right.
So that is what is so scary about all this stuff, because if people actually took the time to analyze the evil deeds that they did at the hands or at the beck and call of the government or their military or the CIA, which is almost a separate entity, which has control of both in some respects. When you look at these people execute these things without guilt. So if everybody had that kind of guilt that the Punisher does, or at least within this show, then much worse things would not happen.
These problems, yeah, exactly. And Billy Rousseau starts as a guy who has that and allows himself to lose it.
Which I think that's the thing, is that it's so easy to. I think there's some kind of not for all of us. It depends on the personality type, but I think there is kind of an inner demon that people will allow themselves to stop recognizing that what they're doing is wrong. They say, well, I did it once, I'm still around, so I can't really say that this is wrong.
And isn't it interesting that this show is about that kind of desensitization?
Yeah.
Because, boy, 10 years ago, I couldn't have handled a lot of what's in this show.
That's an interesting point.
When you... So let's back up a little bit and get into some more just general review stuff, shall we? I want to know how you feel about the pacing of this show, because a lot of people complained that it wasn't the wall-to-wall action they kind of expected, and it's not just superficial, like, I need action every other scene. It's the Punisher. You kind of figure every episode he's going to be gunning people down, and that's not really the show. But it kind of transforms in the last 3 or 4 episodes into what I think people expected this whole show to be. Like, if you can wait it out until the latter, like, quarter, it's exactly the show I might have expected. I think, tell me if you agree with this, pacing wise, I think this is a 6 or 8 episode show stretched into 13 episodes. I don't think it needs to be as long as it is. I don't think they had 13 episodes of story.
I don't know. I kind of liked that they had.
Really?
I did like the 13 episodes, and if you look at the things that have come before it, so you have Punisher Warzone, which I know is not a TV show, but it was wall-to-wall action,
sure.
And it was nonsense. It was
right.
It was just terrible. I mean, sure, it was lots of fun. You got to see a bunch of explosions, people getting shot, blah, blah, blah. But you come to this Punisher, and I feel like the breathing room was necessary.
I don't think we needed that much of it, though. I mean, it feels like it's 13 episodes because that's the count of these shows, except for Defenders, which I think was only shorter not because of the story they were telling, but because of how many people they had to pay to make that show.
Yeah.
I think that was shorter because it was a cost-saving measure. This didn't need to be 13, I don't think. I don't think we needed 2 whole episodes of Punisher, of him having Micro tied to a chair. Like, a lot of that, I think, could have been condensed a little bit.
You know, there also might be just a little bit of a fan in me that's okay with whatever they do.
That's the thing is, for folks like me that are not big Punisher fans, that have to be won over by this material a little bit because it's not immediately my sensibilities, there wasn't enough to latch onto until it really started trucking toward the middle. I think at the end of the day, this is a really, really good show. I think it gets close in quality of storytelling to Daredevil Season 1. I think it's equal to Jessica Jones, but it is the opposite of Luke Cage for me, in that Luke Cage I thought was a show that started off brilliantly and then kind of meandered a little bit into the end and was kind of 2 shows, which is smart if both shows are really good, but the second half of it, I don't think was to the quality of the first half. This was the opposite. This was a show that didn't know how to get started, that has a brilliant ending, and knows just where it's going all the way to the end. It should have been like 8 episodes.
That's fair. I can't disagree with that. I mean, I've complained about this. If you go back far enough and you watch some of these videos, you'll find a video where Vince says something to the effect of television is an imperfect art form.
Yeah.
Because it has to adhere to a certain number of episodes, or it has to adhere
but not
to
Netflix.
Continued episodes. So, yeah, Netflix doesn't have to do that.
It doesn't have to do that.
And, like, you know what? Just
this
make
is
another one.
I will say this is a story that needs to be told serialized. So, I mean, they got that right. I don't think you could do everything this movie is doing in 2 hours. However, there is some background and stuff, and even some scenes that I feel like are kind of extraneous that are a little padded out. And then there's some really nice subtleties and nuances and things that you get through some of that. But, I don't know. I just don't think it needs to be as long as it is.
I did feel like some of the...
Eric was really bored. I mean, the reason he's not here with us is because he got 2 episodes in and he said, I just don't care.
Well, you should give it a second shot.
I think so, too.
Yeah, you know, because the double tap is what makes sure they're dead, right?
But
second shift.
But I think if he went in and watched episode 7 or 8, he would get immersed and he would go back to the beginning.
You know, that's what people tell me about The Simpsons if I started season 5.
That's funny.
I'm like, I don't know that I really care.
But I mean, you remember this when we were in writer school, Vince. I mean, that is a little bit of a problem if people are having that. That like you're possibly you're possibly more immersed and easily dragged through it because you're excited about a Punisher show. But for those of us that aren't,
you know, I feel that when it comes to literature,
I think it's impossible not to compare it to Daredevil season 1,
right? And
I'm just fully ensconced the entire show.
Yeah, Daredevil
and with every character, and I just didn't have that with this.
I think the relationship between the two of them is there is a kind of, well, I'm not going to say that. I was going to say they both have these complex moral grounds, but Punisher is extremely complex.
Complex, yeah, sure.
But you look at Daredevil and Daredevil season 1, where you kind of have two adjacent rises to a higher moral ground, where you have Kingpin, who thinks he's saving the city by manipulating it, and you have Daredevil, who thinks he's saving the city by fighting the forces within it that are essentially hurting smaller people. So you have one who wants to change it from the ground up.
It's Batman Begins.
Yeah, yeah.
Except a lot more violent.
I really like Daredevil season 1.
Well, I think, if I may, Daredevil and Punisher are kind of, for the Netflix shows, the Iron Man and Captain America.
Yeah, I can see that. Which, that's the thing that's always been in the comics, is that Daredevil and Punisher are, they've always tried to make them two sides of the same coin. So, I like what Netflix is doing with this, because the two sides of the same coin are Daredevil and Kingpin. And then the Punisher is the, I don't want to say wild card, that's the first thing that came to mind, I can't stop thinking of it. Dang it.
I'm sorry, I was telling you earlier about a series called Wild Cards.
That might be
That must be why.
So the Punisher comes along, and he has this this kind of adjacent moral
which
code.
I'll be reviewing later in the Omnibus.
Woo! The Omniverse? Where we're going to go into the Nexus and chop some wood?
No. Focus, Vince. This is part of a larger show. It's called the Geekvolution Omnibus. It's like 1 million hours long.
Stop it! You're making him lose his focus!
Anyway, I don't know where you were going. I have no idea where you're going.
I don't know. But, oh yeah, so I really liked this idea that the Punisher is this kind of adjacent but corrupted version. So when you get of the Daredevil idea, so we have to save smaller people, but we also want to correct the problem. So Daredevil wants to save people, Punisher wants to punish the people who essentially hurt people that, you know. So in other words, Daredevil beats the heck out of them. Almost said another word. And
yeah, and they both think that they're solving problems, but each of them thinks that what the other one is doing doesn't actually solve any problem.
So you can. What's interesting is you can kind of see the Punisher torturing himself over the things that he's doing. So,
and Matt Murdock classically does the same thing.
And so Matt Murdock does it, but at the end of the day, is it really that bad what Matt's doing?
Yeah.
And then here's the Punisher, who knows he's doing something terrible.
And this show obviously is not condoning what he's doing, although I thought the freedom fighter thing at the end was interesting.
Please explain.
Well, he's kind of referred to toward the end when you know he's actually going to be able to, you know, go off and live live an actual life. You know, he's talked about like, yeah, it's bad that he's murdering all these people, but like sometimes criminals are just freedom fighters where like they're breaking the law, but are they doing the wrong thing? So there is a question about whether or not some of what Punisher is doing is necessary. I think it's also really important to note how much he's enjoying it and how much of a problem that is.
Yeah, because that's an interesting point.
The Rollins
he feels guilty about it.
The Rollins thing was just one of the hardest things I've ever had to sit through. When he gouges his eyes out. And I mean, like, I had to look away from the screen a lot. Like that was very difficult to sit through. And in fact, that was harder than seeing Billy Russo turn into Jigsaw. That was harder than that. And I mean, that's like scraping across the glass and all of that. I mean, like,
yeah. Yeah.
I honestly didn't know if it was going to go to that extreme of like a Punisher Max type place, and it becomes Punisher Max toward the end of that show.
Yeah. That
Violent
show.
level wise, like, did it go too far? Can you go too far with Punisher?
I don't know. I'm not going to say it went too far.
It felt like it had to be more. I think it thought it had to be more brutal because of how far Daredevil goes.
And also, some other Punisher stuff in the past were pretty
that.
tame. So when somebody says, "I really want brutal Punisher," and you hear that from a bunch of fans, they're like, "Well, we're going to give it to you."
And I don't want it to be gratuitous. I think you could, maybe make the argument either way. Not that it's like gratuitous and that we're enjoying watching these people get hurt, but just that it doesn't have to go as far as it does, and that it maybe does that because that's expected. But I also think we're supposed to appreciate the brutality of what Punisher is doing versus what Matt Murdock does. So if we take that to as bloody of a degree as we do, like, remember the ninja fight in the first season with the chains and the blades at the end are like ripping skin and like, I mean, that thing's hard to watch, or at least it used to be until I got desensitized watching this show.
Yeah.
This show, the point I'm trying to make, the grander point I'm trying to make is that this show is working overtime, trying to make sure that it's not the same thing that first season Daredevil was. I mean, they are very much companion pieces in a lot of ways, and there are a lot of interesting character comparisons you can make even beyond just Punisher and Daredevil. But also, it's I think the reason his backstory is changed is partly just to make sure that it's not too much of the same conflict we had in the first season of Daredevil. It can't be Punisher versus the Mob, because we just watched Daredevil beat the Mob.
Yep, that's fair. I hadn't thought of that, but that's fair. So, and we'll get if we get another Punisher season. I don't see why we won't.
Oh no, we will. It's already been announced.
I don't see why they wouldn't do Punisher versus the Mob or Punisher versus international cartels. I mean,
sure, yeah.
I
think it would be smart to take Punisher out of New York. I think it's high time we did that with somebody, and I think he's the character to do it with.
And you know what? There's Punisher stories that take place way the heck away from New York. So
there's even one that takes place on the moon.
There's one that takes place in the afterlife. There's one where he's Frankenstein. Yeah.
I think they might adapt that, but not until season like 3 or 4.
Frankencastle. Netflix.
So I gotta say,
don't do it.
You are liking the show actually more than I thought you would.
I liked it a lot, and there was a part of me that really wanted a solo Punisher versus the Mob thing, but
sure.
At the end of the day,
but again, you can see why they didn't go there.
Yeah, I'm okay with where they went, and I apologize if I was wrong about my politics.
No.
Maybe have senators' names wrong.
No, that's okay. But I mean, you were using that as a real world example. I understand why you brought that up, and just talking about the way the show was speaking to you, maybe personally, because that's stuff you've been paying attention to and keeping up with. There's a criticism that people have lobbed at this that I wanted to ask you how you felt about, because I shared it too for a minute. And then I thought more about it, and I think I'm okay with it. One of the big concerns a lot of fans have about the show is they say you can't. There's not anything that makes it really clear that it's in a superhero universe. Like, it doesn't really have to be. And there's like a cursory mention or two, but it's not like the other shows where like the Avengers matter. And just tonally, and because it's such a political show, it doesn't feel to a lot of people like it's really, in MCU. You have complained a lot in the past that Punisher doesn't work as well when you put him in a world of superheroes, and I feel like a lot of stories, or a lot of Punisher stories that I've looked at, seem to kind of ignore that a lot. So this is in good company with some of the best Punisher stories where, I don't think it reads contrary. I don't feel like it doesn't feel like the same urban street level New York stuff that we were doing with Daredevil, but it does certainly have a flavor all its own, and it goes way away from the supernatural stuff and all of that. Also coming right off of Defenders and Iron Fist, where not only did we do a lot of that stuff, but it was convoluted and sometimes really hackneyed. I actually kind of appreciated that about this show, and I don't think that means that in another season you can't have Punisher versus not the supernatural, but like more souped up sci-fi weaponry and things like that. So the more I think about it, the more I don't have a problem with it. But
so this show did a thing that, in my mind, all of the good canonical Marvel stuff does best when it's when it ignores that there's any kind of other superhero in the world, except for when you start like a giant gang war. If you have the streets are just on fire, if Daredevil
they have to show up.
Yeah, if they don't show up, then that's not true to the universe. But in this movie, in this incredibly long movie, there's which, I mean, I guess it kind of does. The Netflix shows are a lot like that.
Look, it didn't have to be a 13-hour movie. It could have been an 8-hour movie. It
That's fair.
Been fine.
But in this show, you have a lot of strikes. You have a lot of people go someplace and they essentially fight against each other there, which I know is the most oversimplification of any show that anybody's ever given. But when
it's a really good plot synopsis, Vince. Thanks, buddy.
When you have intel and locations where the intel happens, then you don't necessarily it doesn't make sense for Daredevil to show up.
Yeah,
because I mean, granted, the big car I can't talk.
The stakes are high, but the scope's not too big, right?
Exactly. So
I'll get you back on track.
The big car chase that happens between what's her face and what's his face,
Madani and
yeah. Man, I couldn't even think of Homeland Security. I was like,
dude, it's okay. It's been a few weeks since you watched this.
I was like, Dude Face and Lady Guy.
This is all my fault. If I had just gotten this watched before, it would be more fresh in Vince's mind.
I don't know names.
Would you like a cast list? I have a cast list.
I just call my mom Mom. I don't know what her name is. But like that one, I kind of understand because they're tearing through streets, but they're also in a very small part of town. And,
yeah, sure.
And it's not extremely busy there. I mean, it's one thing. Now, maybe I'm recalling that wrong.
Well, also, this could possibly, maybe I'm not remembering Defenders well enough, this could be going on at precisely the same time that's going on.
Yeah.
So they would be, indisposed, but...
If you got a big ninja organization you're fighting, you're kind of preoccupied.
But keep in mind that it doesn't become, like big news and stuff until there's a bombing. Yeah. So before that, all the stuff leading up to that, that's all a couple of guys everyone thinks are dead doing things covertly, with firefights and things that would have been swept under the rug anyway.
Mm-hmm. And then you have
and then a lot of the big stuff that happens at the end is still stuff that would get swept under the rug.
Yeah, like all the stuff with the CIA. And the CIA, they call it the Central Intelligence Agency, but really, when you have your own ability to execute, not necessarily people, but when you have your own ability to execute, I mean, it's part of it, but to execute plans and ops and all of these things, it's not an intelligence agency. It's not about gathering information. It's about controlling. So when you have the Punisher have to handle these things, it's either going to get swept under the... I mean, maybe that's part of it. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they even bother to use the CIA. Granted, I think a lot of it is because it's very relevant to what's going on. We have a lot of ops that are outside of the military but use the military to get them done. So, and we have a lot of people that they have this kind of cursory understanding of it, and they want to start thumping the Constitution and saying that, where was I going with this? So they'll say that whatever the military does, it does because it's a benevolent organization. Like, that's not necessarily true. When you have the same people, and this stuff's in this
especially
show.
when you have individuals that take advantage of things for their own gain.
Yeah, when you have people like
power corrupting, of course,
Dude Face and Lady Guy, when you have people like Glass Eye McGee who take advantage of their positions.
His name is Rollins.
Yeah, that's what I said, Glass Eye McGee. So Sergeant Glass Eye. When you have people who take advantage of their position.
Real quick, how realistic was that? He gets punched in the face one time by Frank Castle, just given the biggest punch of his life, and that ruins his eye.
That's cool.
We don't do that all the time.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is you'll see these people, like, they'll punch people and they'll be unconscious.
That's really... But now, it's funny because you have plenty of other things in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that are not that realistic, and so this sets it apart for that, but I don't know. I appreciated that.
And I've heard stories from people who have actually done it, knocking people's eyes out. So
wow.
I find this stuff...
Now, with that, you could say that it's hard to believe that Punisher is even walking toward the end, much less doing all the, like, shoot-'em-up stuff that he does after the beating he takes from Rollins, etc., in, Micro's lair. But anyway, I'm sorry, I interrupted you, but
That's okay. I do like that. I like that he's almost dead, like, 6 times in the show.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
I think it's terrific.
So I'm sorry, we're jumping all over the place, but toward the end, I have a couple of potential criticisms that I want to ask you if you buy. One of them is Rollins really stupid enough? I mean, I get why he does it, but I think he's kind of, and he is out of his gourd. Like okay, so maybe I'm gonna answer my own question. They make it really clear that he's completely lost his mind by the end, where he now just wants to punish the Punisher for doing what he did to his face, despite all the horrible things he's done to people. But I still don't know if I buy that guy is nuts enough to pump the Punisher full of adrenaline. Because he's only got his hands tied behind him with a zip tie. And, like, yeah, he breaks out because he gets it cut by Billy Rousseau. But, like, if you're that guy and you've seen and you know that the Punisher has done all these like amazing, like almost impossible things, I don't know that you pump him full of adrenaline when he's only tied by a zip tie. And that seemed a little convenient. That seemed a little easy. Where it's like he's got to be full of adrenaline so that he can then like get through the next hour.
The thing that didn't bother me about that is, in my mind,
not a lot of contrived in this show. I wondered about that one.
I don't know just how torture works. Never done it. It seems wrong to me.
But no. But the reason but don't you remember? The reason he does that is just because he wants to make sure that Frank is like fully awake and aware.
Yeah.
When he hurts him.
Like in my mind, that means he's probably pumped people full of adrenaline before,
okay,
after he's incapacitated them largely. So therefore, he knows how to continue hurting people, and they already established.
Were they Marines?
Well,
like
I mean, radicalized such and suches from other parts of the world. Members of the blah blah brotherhoods. Okay, I'm not going to say.
But even if we buy that he would do it either because he's done it before or because he's crazy, doesn't that look a little bit like just writing a thing in so that we'll buy that he's able to do everything he does after it?
You know,
struck me as a little contrived.
It does seem convenient, but at the same time, I'm just assuming that now it's the same thing. We have for generations assumed that a punch could knock a person out and they can wake up fine with no brain damage. Hi, phone. So. When I watched this show, I just didn't even bother questioning it. I just assumed if his hands were tied behind his back, there's no way he would have had the leverage. Now, your hands tied behind your back, it's also at your weakest point. So,
sure.
Without a cut, I mean, without getting... Because that's the thing, your muscles are strongest at mid-range. So if you're all the way out, that's much weaker. If you're all the way here, that's, again, much weaker. But in the middle...
Right, but you also have to ask, because the bigger issue at play for me, I don't want to harp on this too much, the bigger issue at play for me is just, like, why the writing felt the need to do it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, like, I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm just arguing with you.
Yeah, no, I just
don't
because then the question is, could he have done everything he does after that without the adrenaline? And if he couldn't, then that's really convenient that happens.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
I think... it might not have been as brutal. You know, I think that's what I thought during the show, was that...
oh, you know what? Maybe that's also an excuse so that his punches can be as hard as they are.
Yeah, so he might have been able to break free and kill the heck out of people who need killing. However, he wouldn't have been quite as violent, it wouldn't have been quite as disgustingly awful had they not pumped him full of that stuff.
I'm just thinking about that scene and stuff that happens right before it. I just remembered this. Did you have the same thought I did about the analyst chick that they have trying to break into the computer? That when Rollins sends her off and says pay the girl, that she's probably dead.
Yeah. Yeah. Any person from Rollins' office that gets sent away,
they're all dead.
I don't care if it's a puppy that needs to be fed. They're probably gonna die.
They're dead. Here's my other question.
It's about information control.
The very end of the show,
Central Intelligence Annihilation.
I really like where Frank is at the end. I think the ending is one of the most brilliant of these shows. I think it's excellent. I like what it represents about the character arc that he starts and about who he is now and what he's what he's been through and the decisions he's made, the opportunity for change that he's taken. That at the beginning of the show, he doesn't want to live. He's punishing himself, as you said, constantly hammering, and then you get to the end of the show, and also he won't talk to anyone about his problems, right? And where he's left at the end is he's helping Curtis with that group. I really like leaving him in that place.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. Question is, do we buy that he can continue under an alias when his picture was all over the news in that city? I don't buy that.
And that's what's interesting about some of the Punisher stuff that's come in the past, is that they have these they'll have these people that are just kind of willing to help him. So they'll like interview people in the police force. There'll be members of the police force that say, well, he's a public menace. But are they being fully honest? Because there's other members of the police force who say, well, he's doing service to the city. And also...
Well, I bought that they let him go.
Yeah.
And I was really impressed that they made me buy that. But the thing is, even if you have like police officers that are in the know and people at the top that are allowing him to be there, he's still a wanted man. And if the wrong people found out, he's going to have a really difficult time living in that city. You can't sweep it under the rug as just like, well, it's a heightened comic book thing because of all the ways in which the show is realistic otherwise, and the fact that Billy's big offer to him is get you out of the city, and I think even out of the country. It's weird that he doesn't do that, right? Like, it's weird that he stays in New York at the end.
Yeah. I think...
everyone knows what he looks like. I wondered how the people in the circle at the end were like, wait, you're Frank Castle. Like, nobody recognizes him. I don't buy that.
You know, I wonder, because in my mind, I think the idea here is that there's some kind of brotherhood between veterans. And
there should have been like winks and nods then.
Yeah, I think...
I should have had more of a sense that everyone in that room is in the know and they don't care.
Yeah, in my mind, I feel like he's hiding within the vets at the...
That's probably what it's supposed to be, but...
Now, maybe, I mean, it's interesting that they have all this breathing room for other parts of the show, but they don't put that in there. Would have taken...
Just put that in? Yeah,
so,
a couple seconds. I felt like I needed that, but...
Which, I'm with you. And they're like, that's the thing, is I go to a lot of shows where I'm like, you can make a person buy anything. You just got to make them buy it. So, like, I got into an argument with several people about whether or not Superman would have killed Zod, and I'm like, well, you know what the problem is? It's not that he did it; it's that they didn't make you buy it.
Execution, precisely. Yep.
So, and furthermore, I don't know that he could have under a yellow sun.
I still don't know that. Yeah.
I don't know.
Now I'm trying to remember if I made that point in the rewind, because that's a thing that I always complained about, where I was like, I don't even immediately take it for granted that a Kryptonian that can't be that is invulnerable could do that to another Kryptonian. Anyway, we're
like, I'm pretty sure you could dislocate something. Cause,
sure, yeah.
But that's fluid moving around. That's all that is.
Anyway, so obviously a million other things we could talk about with this show. We've been talking for a little while. What else do you want to make sure that we talk about?
I really like that he comes to grips with what he is at the end, which maybe makes it hard to buy that he would be part of a veteran support group. But where he in his mind, and I think this is where the whole melodramatic wife stuff.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about that. Yeah.
Which that doesn't bother me based on where it goes, because at the end he has to decide for himself: am I a monster or am I a human being? And now, granted, I think that's an oversimplification, but basically he says, am I going to continue killing, or can I just accept, or can I accept who I am and continue doing what I'm doing, or can I, or do I have to go back to the life that I had, which he can't. So
yeah, I think it's more that he forgives himself, but he's not going to forgive other people like him.
Yeah. And that's what's interesting, is part of it is
like, I think there still is maybe a little bit of a contradiction and a hypocrisy even at the very end. But I mean, you don't get the sense that he's
the human
not
psyche is willing to save itself.
Yeah, I mean, you don't get the sense that he's not still going to go out and kill the bad guys if there's a war to fight. Remember, you just said there's not a war to fight.
Right.
If he has one, he's going to fight him. We know there's going to be another season of the show, so of course he's going to be going out and killing people again. He's not going to be Old Man Logan. We're not going to go a whole season before he pulls the claws out. You know.
I find the motivation interesting, and I think it's also interesting that he's not just talking about forgiving himself for killing an innocent person, but also forgiving himself for enjoying the life.
Yeah.
So he says, I'm a soldier, this is what I do best, and I always had this issue because I wanted to be out there, I wanted to be in the, or whatever you call it.
But it's okay as long as I'm in the right.
Yeah, he wanted to be humping it, which is a funny phrase, but it's true. Humping it through the...
Which again is and I'm not saying that like that's necessarily right. I'm saying that that's the show looking at things from his perspective, which I really appreciate. One thing we haven't talked about, which we should at least touch on, is and tell me if you agree with this, because I was going to present this as a topic, but it's kind of more my viewpoint on it. But I think this show does a really good job of bringing up some major hot button issues that aren't there to preach about them, but are there because it's natural to discuss and look at these things when the Punisher is the character you're following, and it gives you all sides of issues. So there's a really thoughtful, well-handled argument about the gun control issue. And the show lets you make up your own mind about that. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that I feel like there's a lot of stuff that's just a soapbox that people can get up on. And I started worrying about that about episode 3, and I was like, oh, God.
I don't think this does that, do you?
What I find interesting about it is...
It would be really easy for people to point at certain aspects of this and say this is a conservative show, and look at other aspects and say this is a liberal show.
Yeah.
Right? Because it says in places, see, look, guns are necessary, and then it says in other places, look how frickin' scary guns are.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that about it.
I think the moment...
one of the reasons Karen Page is so interesting is because she carries a gun, but is otherwise seems like a pretty progressive kind of person.
Mm-hmm. I like Lewis Wilson's character so much at his demise because of this argument. So much about it is, here's this gun thumper who says that by God we should all have our guns to protect ourselves, but he's out there killing folks. And I find it interesting when he locks himself away in the whatever it was, fridge, I guess, and realizes, or maybe it was a vault. So he realizes that...
Yeah, I thought it was a freezer, but it doesn't matter.
He realizes that he's made a bunch of mistakes here recently. He doesn't know how to cope with it, and he realizes that he's probably caught. And at least that's kind of what I gathered from it.
Yeah.
And then the Punisher, who sees this person who has become unhinged and encourages him to kill himself. Come on, kid, you can do it. And
yeah, that was heavy.
Like, when I look at the ending where he gets really brutal... And he's gouging folks' eyes out, Rollins, and to me, that is less brutal than saying, "Come on, kid, you can do it."
Wow, yeah.
And because with that, it's dark as heck. I'm super glad they went there, because I feel like that's the most interesting.
It's like you've gone too far. There's no coming back from that.
And he doesn't want to have to kill. You know, you don't want to kill somebody who's unhinged. You want to kill a fellow soldier. But here's this person who looks like he's about to end it.
And Frank sympathizes with him.
Mm-hmm. Which I think is part of the reason why at the end, like, that's the only thing that makes me justify it, is so here's this person who says, I will live with the fact that I want a war to fight, and I will fight whatever war that I feel is, you know, within my moral compass, and then and he will create a war to fight in order to guide that moral compass. So then he goes to this veterans group,
and that's the way in which he refuses to change, right? Because I mean, he could choose to stop doing that, and we would maybe applaud him for it. You know, if he went and lived his own life and, you know, pretended to be Pete,
right, and
just went and got a job at IHOP or something, you know, we would applaud that.
Paid for my cabs. Hello, pancakes. Flip those things out there.
I didn't go to breakfast on purpose, but I think there was like a subconscious thing there. He loves his breakfast. I love all all the
doesn't.
I love all the personal details with him. I like that he's a reader. I like that he's a thoughtful guy.
Yeah.
I like something that stuck with me that has nothing to do, I don't think, with anything else in the show, but I forget what it was. But I mean, we know he quotes poetry. Like, this is not a guy that you would think, and I don't know that traditionally he is that you would think is like a real intellectual, and he's obviously a real gruff guy, but he thinks about things, and it's actually easier to buy that he goes as extreme as he does, because that's thinkers who overthink their lives, right? Like
which explains why he's so, like, if you are an intellectual, even if you're an unguided intellectual,
yeah,
and you understand that there is moral complication, you will be more likely to torture yourself.
Yeah, he's overthinking things.
So, and what's interesting is that there are personality types out there who are more prone to introspection than others. So you can have some that are these like movers and shakers that, like Rollins, that don't care what they do.
With his wife, he's intentionally not being as introspective as he usually would. He forces himself to only remember her one way.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
And that's why it looks melodramatic to us until they make it clearer what it is. He's only, because I had the same thing. I was like, we're not making her a character. If we have to keep flashing back to her, can't we get anything about her at all? She's a completely generic, just like pretty face. That's on purpose. That helps him stay angry, because you hear him several times say, "We had problems. We weren't perfect." He won't let himself internalize the ways in which they weren't perfect, because he's afraid that he won't be as angry about her death that way.
Yeah.
I think it has to play the way it plays.
That is a terrific point.
I think it has to.
Oh my gosh, that's a terrific point.
That's why it's like that.
In some ways, he knows that with his family out of the picture, he is free to continue the war that he's fighting.
And he's also free to have a life if he wants to.
So, yeah. So if he doesn't...
he's not going to let that happen either.
And maybe the life that he wants... Well, I think that's the point of him forgiving himself.
It's almost like trying to throw away his own humanity.
Yeah, he says, I don't want to be a human being anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be a soldier, and I want to fight the war I want to fight. And so when he says at the end that he's going to forgive, or he's going to accept himself for who he is, now I'm paraphrasing, but still, he says that there's almost a part of him that says, I'm glad my family's gone. And I feel super guilty about that.
Yeah.
So, and he feels guilty about it, but he also has to forgive himself and move forward.
The thing that's great. The thing I wanted to mention a minute ago that I mean, like if I watch this again, I might think more about it, and there might be this might connect to something else in the show or be a larger idea. But there's a thing that stuck with me, and I can't explain why. But I just thought it was. I think part of it is just because like he is a thinker. In another life, he could have been like an English teacher or something, which is weird. Like Frank Castle, English teacher. But do you remember that part where he's in the flashback where he's on the boat with his kids?
I was just thinking that.
And he is and he's telling a nursery rhyme, and he gets through the first verse, and his son says it's stupid. Do you remember what he says? He says it's not stupid, it's nonsense. There's a difference. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why that stuck with me.
He's because I feel like he will I don't know if it's splitting hairs, but I feel maybe that's part of what they're trying to say is that
I don't want to read into that, but I want it to mean something, and it stuck with me.
I find that stuff interesting, and I also find it interesting how
yeah, that's all I can say about it is that it's interesting
when he blows up at his kid and grabs his face.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no.
And then the way he handles the kid later with the knife and doesn't actually understand the psychology and what's going on with him. Mm-hmm. Like, those are related things.
Yeah. And that stuff was very interesting. And, oh my God, like, I have no idea what to say about it. It was just a perfect moment.
Yeah.
Where he thinks he's handling someone who is violent and crazy.
Yeah.
And then he turns out he's handling somebody who is scared. And how he is able to, like, and you can see the guilt in his face. He feels so bad about it.
I mean, how much of what he does comes from his own fear? And remember, and I think this is brilliant, the season ends with him talking about how scared he is. I just love that. Oh, that's where we're left, is I'm scared. The end.
Yeah. I think Punisher realizes he's a hammer, and then sometimes he has to figure out how to use a thumbtack. So
we haven't. That's great. We haven't talked much about Micro, and I want to do that real quick because I think he's really fascinating, and we've talked so much about other characters that we've spent time. I kind of thought maybe we would spend talking about him.
You almost have to you almost have to involve things like the CIA if you're going to have somebody who is a high-level computer user. Now, I know that's not a title or something, but
he's an analyst. Yeah.
So yeah, you have an analyst. You have a person who is extremely adept at using any kind of hacking software, and he can set up his own stronghold. That's CIA material right there.
And you buy that the guy that ran that video, all the way up to the top, and was everyone thought was killed for it, that he's able to do all the stuff he's able to do. So it feels a lot less contrived when he presses some magic buttons and makes stuff happen.
And I think
because there's so much of that in this show, but I end up buying it because of his skills.
I was just thinking that Micro is almost like
the thing he sets up at the end. Sorry, with the camera and where he's able to get into Madani's database or into her computer and then show her that camera. There are other shows where I'd be like Arrow with Felicity, where I'd be like, how'd you even do that? With him, I didn't even question it.
Weren't you a secretary a minute ago?
but
she's like, no, I just ran TPS reports.
No, we have to have computer geniuses in superhero shows, and I'm that person. I'm sorry, you were talking.
Oh heck. Oh yeah. So what I find super interesting, like a nice, not necessarily a counterpoint, but parallel. That's what I'm looking for. So you have the parallel. I guess it could be a counterpoint between Micro and the Punisher.
Yeah.
Where
that's where I was about to go. Yeah.
The Punisher is very guilty, or feels very guilty, that he was not able to protect his family. And here's Micro, who feels guilty that he had to leave his family to protect them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that there's envy between Punisher and Micro, where
they both lose their lives because of in some way because of their initial idealism. They both start to question justice. Although I think Punisher actually believes in justice more than Micro does.
Yeah, I think Micro at some point, I would agree with that, because Micro at some point, when he starts trying to make deals with Madani and start trying to go against what the Punisher is trying to achieve, he is willing to compromise in order to get his family back. And
and he also just flat out says, I don't believe in justice.
Yeah, there's that.
Also that, yeah. and Punisher must to some degree, because he has certain lines and he thinks these people need to die, and some of it is to make himself feel better.
Yeah.
And some of it is they need to, when he says kill them all, which is a big Punisher thing, of course. We say that a lot. We also say welcome back Frank a lot.
Yeah.
We loved saying that.
Well, I believe that was the first Garth Ennis storyline.
Right.
That was still within the Marvel U. So
but
welcome back.
I'm just saying that's why they did that. Like that line is in that show at least twice.
And there's little parts of me, there's not a lot of geek stuff when they name drop or do the pandering that makes me go, woo! They're like, oh my god, they mentioned Kryptonite and Batman. They're like, I really don't care. But you say welcome back Frank, and I'm like, thank you.
Oh really? I thought you might be like, well yeah, of course they're gonna say that.
I don't mind it. I like it.
That's funny.
Heck, I don't care what they want to bring in as long as they do what they did in this show and make it a really interesting show.
Yeah, so what I thought was a stroke of genius with Micro is you have Punisher who goes on his crusade because he loses his family. And you have and they're opposites in really interesting ways, and that brings them together versus the very classic friends, best friends that turn enemies thing with Frank and Billy, where they're too much the same person, and then at the end they go in totally different ways. These guys are total opposites that meet up someplace, and with Micro, he's a guy that puts himself and his family on the line because he thinks it's the right thing to do, and Frank does the wrong thing sort of for the right reasons, but he always knows it's wrong, and that's what starts everything. But as far as murdering the guy under Rollins' orders, but also you've got Micro's family who all think that they've lost him, and they all in various ways kind of become like his Punisher. There's a whole family of Punishers then, and not really, but I mean each of them. You could almost break this down. This might sound like a real pretentious thing to say. You could almost break the three of them down and be here are different parts of somebody's psyche after somebody dies. You know what I mean? You like stages of grief or something. You know what I mean? So like you have a whole. I shouldn't say family of Punishers. I should say you've got the Punisher and he lost his whole family, and then you've got a guy that they think is dead, and then a family that is the Punisher. That is like the person that the person that lost everything. But as
the parallel
as
is the loss, not necessarily the persona.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I loved that.
That's fascinating. And so in other words, when Pete and family, oh man, whatever Microchip's wife's name is, Sarah. Boy, I was not.
I remembered it because that's my wife. You know.
Oh, that's a good point. Who's your wife again? Was it Bill? Wasn't sure.
Yeah, it's my wife's name is Bill Nye the Science Chick.
So that's why they seem to connect so well, is because they all connect via the loss. And maybe that's what keeps the Punisher from being really, really mean to this kid with a knife. So, although that knife is scary as heck.
Yes, it is.
So I'm not a big gun guy. I know that's really funny since I love the Punisher.
You love the Punisher, yeah.
I have a 22. We might not keep it. I have no idea.
Oh, you're just coming out and saying that. Wow, okay.
So we might get rid of it. Why? We don't use it for shooting. I mean, take it out, clean it once in a while, put it back in the case. I'm like, what do you do with it if you don't shoot it? So, at the end of the day, I have my machine gun to take care of anybody coming. I'm kidding.
What else do we want to make sure we mention? Like I said that a while back, and then I was like, oh, here's all these other things we should probably weigh in on a little bit. But you want to do just a real quick final thoughts thing, or are there any other major elements you wanted to make sure you got to talk about?
Heck, I have no idea. I also really like the director of the CIA. I found her fascinating, and
yeah,
I thought all of the like all this kind of delusion, I don't know if that's a word, the diluting of morals throughout these people. So we need to make sure the CIA survives. Well, why? So you can another day run drugs and kill innocent people? Well, no, so someday we can help get a democratically elected leader actually into power. Well, cool, but what about the next nation that you decide that leader doesn't support your needs, so you take a democratically elected leader out, stuff like that. So, which is things that you see in stuff like...
well, but there's also just the fear of, like, if we let the CIA crumble, it ruins everything. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that is the domino that drops the system itself. And there's a lot of, like, can we believe in the system at all anymore?
Well, that's the thing, is that part of it is I think you can. I think that
I think the optimism of the show is that you can believe in individuals.
Yeah. So...
Because it would be really easy to look at this and be like, the show is really super cynical. It's basically just saying that society is doomed to fail, the end. And I don't think that's what it is.
Because then you have people like the Punisher, you have people like Curtis.
Well, but beyond that, you have people in the CIA itself.
You have people like Micro. So,
but you also have Madani. You know what I mean? Like there are and you have
she's
the woman
Homeland Security, so...
But what I'm saying is you have people within the government that actually are there for the right reasons. It's really important that you have those people. That not everybody is corrupt. Now you have people like the woman that runs the CIA, who like compromise because in the moment they feel like they have to. But that's different than people who have been fully corrupted. She's not a Rollins. She's nowhere near that.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting is you'll have those super corruption, and then you'll have the idealist of Madani, who has trouble going up the ranks, even though she ends up there because of death, but who has trouble moving up the ranks because she is unwilling to compromise. And then you have all these people who move way up the ranks because they're willing to compromise, but then at the end, the evil job still gets done.
Yeah.
And the evil job still gets covered up. Sure, maybe Rollins is out, but then the next Rollins will rise to power underneath her again.
Well, and I think it's also important to note that, I mean, this is a heavy show. There's just so much in that of this kind of thoughtful discussion about all this stuff in the show. We also haven't mentioned what the show has to say about people in the field who get their hands dirty versus people behind a desk.
That's a good point.
It's so much about that.
Because sometimes, because that's the thing, like Micro was full on ready to take responsibility until it was time for him to hold a gun, and that was the moment where he started thinking, well, maybe I can compromise.
It's important that he has a weak stomach. He has a hard time seeing people sewn up.
And I'm okay, although it's funny that later on he's like a battle medic, or a combat medic, where he's like, sure, I can sew you up, no problem, but then he sees, oh God, you're dying.
Yeah, that's true. Well, that was just an arm.
Yeah.
It wasn't as bad, but actually, I forgot about that. That is a really good point you're making.
That was my big problem with the show. I was like, why now?
But like, I feel like Micro is supposed to kind of be like, at the end of the day anyway, a midpoint, because he doesn't start there. But at the end of the day, he's a midpoint between the Punisher and somebody like Billy, or even on a much farther end, at least initially. Rollins, because obviously as Jigsaw he's just going to turn into like crazier Rollins, I'm sure, but with different motivations, of course. But with Micro, you have a guy who starts as the guy behind the desk, and he ends as a guy who is willing to get his hands dirty, but he doesn't go as far as the Punisher, and so it's that like the right answer lies someplace in the middle kind of thing.
Yeah. Hey, you brought up Billy. Something interesting about Jigsaw, future Jigsaw,
future Jigsaw,
is I wonder if part of him is that he has no introspection, and his moral compass only applies to people that he knows.
That's interesting.
So he looks at the Punisher and says, I want to save you. I can get you out of this city, I can get you out of this country, you can start a new life somewhere else with a different name. We'll give you assets. I will do that for you because you're my friend.
And he's not lying when he says that.
Yeah, I don't think he is.
No, I don't. Yeah.
So,
and that's just before he murders someone, right?
And he's willing, because he's a sick individual whose moral compass is, I will help anyone I personally care about.
That's great. Good point.
But if you cross me, I will hurt you. And, not necessarily cross him specifically, but if you get in the way of his plans, the plans are more important than you. So
he doesn't believe in attachment as a weakness like Rollins does, but he isn't developing them as much anymore. I mean, it was easier for him to kill Madani than it would have been if Madani was Frank Castle. If he had known her from years earlier, because I think he's more and more losing his humanity.
That's fascinating. And sometimes I wonder if there's like kind of a gender thing with Madani.
Interesting.
Meaning, like, maybe Russo, maybe Russo doesn't actually care. Like, maybe battle buddies are one thing, but personal relationships are another thing. So maybe he only actually cares about other events.
She was a means to an end.
At
that point,
what's his face? Wilson was kicked out of the military company run by Russo. Mm-hmm. So at the behest of another veteran, in order to make sure that he can help Wilson as another veteran.
Yeah. So
maybe he only actually cares about other guys that were in the thick of it.
Yeah, and he wasn't a family man.
Yeah.
Like when he was, and remember he didn't have a family. That flashback with them at the carnival is really important.
Yeah.
And I was really glad we got that, and I think it was good to have that where we got it. Oh, speaking of getting things where they get it, did you not find initially, and I think ultimately it's really well crafted, but in a binge show, I thought the bombing episode where Rousseau finally reveals his true colors to Madani was really jarring, being non-linear in the like 9 episodes into a show that hasn't been non-linear at all. I had a hard time getting my mind around that for a minute.
Yeah. I didn't really think too hard about it, but there was stuff about the Madani-Russo relationship that seemed... Well, maybe it's because the rest of it was so evenly paced and so slow moving to a certain point, but then there are other things that are just Madani and Russo, it escalated from the word go.
Yeah, well, and I don't even mean so much about the relationship. I'm just tacking this on, like just that in the middle of a show that you're kind of expected to watch a bunch of episodes in a row, we have a real standalone type episode where we start in the future and we back up and we do that going back and forth between time periods thing. That was really jarring in the middle of the show. If this is network television, that's totally cool.
Well, I mean, maybe I don't know. I'm not.
At the end of the day,
maybe I am.
At the end of the day, it was hard to imagine how else that story would have been told. So I appreciated it for that, but
Because I guess the idea is that when you tell it that way, it really calls more attention to it. It gives a lot of drama. It gives a lot of, as opposed to, by the way, I'm evil as heck. And you go, as heck. I'm surprised you're that evil if you said the word heck to me. So, it's not a funny joke. Let's move on.
No, but the point I'm trying to make is when the episode starts, I was afraid I missed an episode. I actually paused it and went back and made sure that I was watching the right episode next.
I've done that before.
Because we're suddenly dealing with a big bombing that happened, and I was like, when did this happen? And that's a weird thing to do in the middle of a binge show.
That is a weird thing to do.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Not even about the Madania relationship. That's all I'm saying. I thought that was that was really jarring right away. I might have given us a timestamp right away.
Yeah. And then...
I don't think it does. Or maybe I blinked or looked away and there actually is a timestamp and it's not a problem. But I don't think there was.
I don't recall. But in my mind, somewhere in that show, Jack Bauer is going to show up if you put a timestamp on it.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think part of what made this really intense show easier for me to get through is that I watched a lot of 24, and I think they looked at that show some, and I think it's important to note, and it's a lot of fun, that Rollins is played by... the guy that runs CTU for a number of seasons in that show.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. And he's this seemingly really cold, unemotional guy that does not care who gets killed. I mean, he's playing that character again, except he's actually a human being in that show.
That sounds interesting. There's something about his face, then.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the missing eye.
And where he's just like, he's really ignorant, and he doesn't like to pay attention to facts, and he just wants things done his way. And I mean, like, he was perfect for that character. Another thing, real quick, that I meant to mention earlier that I forgot about, that I think is really cool, is I think one of the best scenes in the show, and just one of the smartest scenes in the show, is when Karen is being held by the guy with the bomb, and she and Frank are communicating about which wire to pull. I thought that was amazingly written.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? And then when he says, "Could you tell me all the things in that bag?" Because that tells him. Because when she says yes, that tells him she's got a gun, and he's told her to fire it. Like the way they communicate in that scene, I thought was incredibly well written and well performed.
I agree. That's the thing. I mean, I guess we didn't talk a heck of a lot about Karen Page in The Punisher, but they worked well. Because here's a brutalized woman who has a really sad past. And then you have the Punisher, who could teach her to protect herself, but if she did, then she'd be going against her own moral code.
Yeah.
And but then again, she also has a big heart, and a person who she recognizes that the Punisher is in some ways a decent person, who is, in her opinion, I suppose, wayward. But then she sympathizes with him.
Yeah.
Because if he doesn't do what he does, then she's not, free to do what she would do. What if I need a person to protect me from the crazy people in my life? I have, I suppose, Daredevil, and there's the Punisher. The Punisher is going to take care of it permanently.
Well, she doesn't like what he does, and remember, like, she stopped even associating with Matt Murdock because he goes out and does what he does.
Yeah.
But you're right that she does sympathize, and that she sees a difference between him and a terrorist.
And I suppose that when you look at Daredevil, there's a person who doesn't necessarily need to be saved, but there's a person who needs to be directed. Punisher, in some ways, needs to be saved from himself.
That's great. Yeah.
So Karen takes him as a charity case in some ways, but then it's a symbiotic relationship.
She is somebody who needs who needs a soul and can maybe help be that soul.
Mm-hmm. So I guess associating with Matt Murdock puts her at risk, but associating with Punisher might be worth the risk.
Yeah, sure. And if this is post Defenders, at this point, I think she has started associating with Matt Murdock again. But well, everyone thinks he's dead. But we have a lot of people faking their own deaths in this show. I thought it was hilarious that we did it with Micro twice. I loved that. And did they get you with that? I thought they killed him. I really did. I totally bought it. And started like running through things in my brain, going, "Wait, did we really say everything we had to say with this character?" And
yeah, I was on the fence.
We didn't. And I loved that I was duped into that.
I was on the fence. I was like, "Oh no, they killed him." Did they kill him? I don't know. So
it's just cool that everybody thought he was dead, and then they faked me out, and like they fake his death for me, and that's really cool.
That's fun. So you become like his family.
That's right!
You're your own little Punisher.
Our own little Punisher, yeah. No, I really appreciate it because I immediately... Did you have this? I immediately start thinking, wait a minute, how do you do a second season without Micro? Who's he going to talk to? And are we going to have to watch him, like, beat somebody else in a chair for 2 episodes before they're friends? Like...
I like the idea that Micro will continue to lead a double life with his own secret room helping the Punisher out with drones, which the drone thing was genius.
Yeah, no, that was awesome.
Like, how is it that the Punisher can be a one-man army and not die?
And I love that. Well, yeah, and you actually kind of buy the battle van thing better in the modern age.
Yeah, it makes so much more sense. So you have a van that carries a bunch of weapons. Cool. Now you have a van that is your base of operations. Amazing.
Yeah.
Granted, I mean, that's in the comics too, but that kind of developed over time.
Yeah, but you're able to do that realistically now in a way you couldn't have 30 years ago, just because of the technology we have. Like if Punisher had to have futuristic tech at one time, he doesn't need it now.
Yeah. What's by the by,
you can get it at any here in in 1955 it's a little hard to come by, but here in 1985 you can get it at any corner drugstore.
I suppose I should, since I just remembered this, Punisher has killed innocents before, but. That's because...
But it wasn't the crux of his backstory.
Right. So the Punisher who killed innocents was like the Punisher who was being manipulated by some kind of drug, and he was going out and like killing people for nothing. Like you're a crosswalker, so or you're a jaywalker, so
yeah,
don't litter. So the Punisher has killed innocents before, but
this Punisher doesn't care about the law.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that's the thing. I suppose that's always been the case is that the Punisher doesn't care about the law because the law protects
but if he's
criminals.
murdering jaywalkers.
Yeah, and that's a much different thing.
Yeah, it only makes sense if the Punisher is killing people for hurting an innocent person, like for hurting someone else. I don't think the Punisher cares what you do as long as you don't hurt someone else.
I think the longest running characterization of the Punisher is that he does not kill innocents and is good at not killing innocents.
Yeah,
so it's not just that he doesn't do it; he is able to conduct his missions without killing innocents.
Well, maybe it's smart to have that in his background because if he accidentally kills someone, you might buy that he can actually continue moving forward and he doesn't blow his own brains out.
Yeah, or even that he would be better at. He would be more careful collecting intel and conducting missions.
Well, but, and they make him a sniper a lot more often than he sometimes is. I mean, I know he starts as a sniper. I mean, the first issue of Amazing Spider-Man he shows up in, it's a scope. He's a sniper.
So he's trying to kill an innocent because he's being manipulated by the Jackals. So obviously there is a portion.
Wasn't he a little reinvented right after that too? Like
yes,
it's not exactly
extremely reinvented.
Yeah,
because that's what's interesting is that the Punisher was originally ripped off from a Don Pendleton character called the Executioner. And so, therefore, and for whatever reason, Pendleton decided he wasn't going to sue Marvel because he's like, it's just a little comic book. What does anybody care? So,
did he sue them later, or did he just never care about it?
I don't think he ever did. I don't think he ever went back to do it.
And
I think he probably cares a little bit now, but it seems significantly after the fact.
Yeah.
So, they, it was straight up ripped off. There was a battle van in the Executioner. So,
wow.
Which
does it have the satellite dish on top?
I have no idea. I started reading the first Executioner book, and I thought it was so boring I stopped. And I don't know, I just didn't care about it. It wasn't quite as interesting as Punisher. And I didn't like the prose. I didn't like the way he wrote the book. But, I mean, that being said, there's boatloads of them. There's
really?
Oh my God. He didn't write all of them, but he wrote a significant number, and then somebody else kept it going. So there are boatloads of Executioner books if you want to check them out. So you move forward, and I do think it kind of divorces itself from Executioner a little bit, because Punisher becomes someone who is good at not killing innocents, as opposed to a person who can be easily manipulated into killing innocents. And that would be the first Stephen Grant story arc, where I think if you get it in trade now, it's called Circle of Blood. Otherwise, it was Punisher Volume 1, which is terrific. Check it out. So I like this idea that I'd like to see an entire season about Punisher in jail. That'd be kick-ass.
Really?
Oh my gosh. Excuse me. That would be kick-butt.
Oh, that's all right. And also, we could do some interesting parallels and stuff with some of the prison stuff we've already done.
Yeah.
Because all that Kingpin stuff in Season 2, I think, is really good.
And I think it was in season 2. I forget where he says like, I'm not trapped in here with you. You're trapped in here with me.
That's Watchmen.
That's Watchmen?
That's Rorschach and Watchmen.
Oh, heck, I forgot. But anyway, it's the same principle.
It is, absolutely, sure.
So, I got my quotes mixed up.
That's all right.
I apologize. I blame Joker.
I want to see the Punisher go up against the Kingpin. I think that needs to happen.
And, at some point in the comic books that happens, but
of course, yeah.
Because the nature of the Punisher is to kill the guy that he's trying to, his target anyway, is you would never kill the Kingpin. Granted, now the Kingpin's dead in the comics, so supposedly.
No,
right?
he's come back.
Oh, he's back now? Or was he?
Or did they just kill him again?
You know what? I'm not sure where the Kingpin is, but I know in the regular Marvel U right now, there is the most recent Kingpin was Black Cat.
No, you just know about the stuff after it. Yeah, I think she technically still is. No, I think he's the mayor right now.
Oh,
yeah.
I've been wondering where the heck Wilson Fisk is.
Well, he had his own miniseries like 6 months ago, and then he's been.
You are right.
Yeah, and then he's been mixed in with Daredevil and stuff, and he was in Defenders, and then But I haven't read the last few issues of Daredevil, so when you said that, I thought maybe you knew something I didn't, and he just died again. But they just brought him back, so I wouldn't think they would do that.
Yeah.
But no, there was a whole Mayor Fisk story arc for Daredevil, for Soul's Daredevil, but I haven't read that stuff yet because I'm like 8 issues behind or something.
Fair enough. I keep seeing Black Cat Kingpin, and I was like, well,
yeah,
I guess he's
just
dead.
Well, he's just running he just had kind of a different role, right? Because
fair enough. He'll be Kingpin again.
Yeah, because he comes back in and everybody thinks that he's gone straight. But anyway, I digress. Folks, thanks a lot for watching. We sure appreciate it. Vince, thanks for coming back. You must be over the moon if you like that show that much.
I liked it quite a lot. I don't know. I mean,
in some ways, it's got to be kind of what you've always been, waiting for, right?
Yeah, my one complaint about the fallout from this show is that they're starting to make Punisher in the comics look like John Barenthal.
Oh, really?
And like right now, the Punisher Legacy stuff that's going on is, or I guess Punisher Marvel Legacy, whatever they call it, is he looks just like him. And I'm like, why? Now, granted, he's wearing an Iron Man suit with a Punisher skull on the front, so it's not like it's the exact same thing. And he's fighting pseudo-Russians. Which, they're not Russians, but they have Russian-sounding names.
I mean, naturally that's irritating to you, but at the same time, it's not surprising.
No.
Because the Punisher is not real popular in comics.
Yeah, which, for a while there, he was, which I'm glad that he's not anymore, because then he's in everything when they do that.
Yeah.
And then I'm buying, like, one issue of whatever, Nighthawk.
He's one of those characters that that sort of like Moon Knight and Ghost Rider, like he comes in and out. Sometimes he has a monthly, sometimes he doesn't. There's not always a Punisher book. Like there's always a Daredevil book.
I really like what they're doing right now with Punisher Platoon. I think that stuff is fascinating. Have you seen any of this? Punisher Platoon is Punisher before he becomes a Punisher, before he goes through, because Punisher Born is basically what creates the Punisher's psyche in Vietnam. But Punisher Platoon is basically, he's a rookie. He's just out of academy, and he is now in, he's, whatever you call it, he's in the thick of it. He's out there trying to figure out how to keep his guys alive.
So this is like before his family gets killed?
Yeah. So
I wouldn't think that would be that interesting.
It's super interesting.
Is it really?
But it is a war book, so it's not exactly
so
the same
obviously
thing.
I don't care. My eyes immediately glaze over, and that's part of why I'm not.
I think you might find it interesting.
Really, that's why I'm not immediately into the Punisher, even just as a concept, and why I wasn't. Why this show didn't speak to me in the way that I'm sure it spoke to a lot of people that have. Veterans in their family or that have been veterans, that kind of, because I've heard a lot of people talk about how important they think the show is for the way it portrays people who have PTSD. So from an academic standpoint, a storytelling standpoint, like what I was gonna say at the beginning of this review until we started talking, and as we talked it out, it got more interesting in my brain, is I bet if I write about this show, it's really interesting and genius. But as I'm just watching it, like, I want to ask you this question: how entertaining is this show? Because that's not the word I would use for it.
Yeah, no, I'd call it a super interesting show. I'm not saying that. Like, that's the thing is, if somebody says to me, "I really like high flying action," I would say, "Well, you should probably go watch Avengers."
Yeah, well, of course, sure, yeah.
But if you like,
but that's not Netflix Marvel at all. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Yeah, well, that's
not
very
what
true.
those are for.
Like, if you want a lot of really good action, then you should watch almost any of the other ones.
Sure, yeah.
If you want...
Now, I would say, if you want the perfect blend of both, it's Black Panther. Because Black Panther could have been a Netflix show. That's what's so cool and interesting, and we're going to review that on the Omnibus.
Oh, man, I was in love with Black Panther.
A little bit... Oh, yeah, me too. A little bit later, but, like, with...
You know what my least favorite thing about Black Panther was? The 6-year-old that wouldn't stop kicking my chair.
Oh, that sucks. But, like, Killmonger is, and we'll probably talk about this later, but Killmonger is a Netflix Marvel villain, and we never thought we'd see that in those movies. Everybody's always like, we're never going to let them get as you know, serious and dark as the Netflix shows, and they managed to have a show that's kind of, or to have a movie that's not only okay for kids to watch, but is also a really good role model for kids, and have a villain who has like 600 kills on his chest, like on his body. That's amazing. Now,
just in case,
perfect blend of those things.
Just in case this is a spoiler alert. So
yeah, sure.
What I like about Black Panther in relation to Punisher, Netflix Punisher,
bring us back,
is come on with me. So what I like about it though is how much both shows are about the CIA causing the problems that the CIA fixes. So Killmonger is created by the CIA.
Yeah.
Not intentionally, but they see it as a means to an end.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have Glass Face or Glass Eye McGee.
No, we'll just keep
Rollins.
Rollins!
What the heck? So Rollins, who is created essentially because the CIA requires you to do some disgusting things, and when you start out being a disgusting person, you're going to get really into it. So, as it turns out, you know, some people keep collections of coins, other people keep fingers. I mean, you know, whatever. So that's what I find interesting, is that you have the CIA who creates monsters within itself, and within the Punisher, and then within Black Panther you have the CIA that will create monsters as kind of satellite agents, which is, one, you have people who will corrupt themselves by necessity in order to keep the CIA going, and then you have people who are corrupted by the continued support of the CIA, and I find that stuff fascinating. And I'm like, guys, we have the perfect, like, both of these things are the perfect critique of what's going on in American politics since Truman. And I'm like, this is fascinating. Like, please give me more Marvel.
And in superhero stuff. I mean,
who would have thought?
Yeah. Well, and what it has to say about isolationism versus just taking over the world, and we're going to talk about all that later. But
which I suppose maybe I'd like to be in on the Black Panther one too.
If you're available Sunday night, you should come. And yes,
I don't know why it's not a calendar. Why am I looking at my
We'll
watch?
have Dan here. It'll be a great panel.
Oh, who's Dan? No.
He's just some guy that we found on the street that had Black Panther t-shirt, and we were like, you should come talk Black Panther with us. If you're watching this as its own video, thanks a lot for tuning in. If you're watching the Omnibus, we're going to move on right now to the next segment. Thanks a bunch for watching, and we'll see Vince again hopefully real soon. Thanks for being here with me, Vince.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Appreciate you, buddy.